Hey everybody, Andy from Ant Panda. So, this is going to be a tough video to make, mainly because this has actually been something I've been playing around, looking at, paying attention to for a few days. And to be honest, it's a tough type of review, I would have to say, for a game. So, we'll get started with quick stuff offhand. Very quick as far as the things I've noticed. It's pretty self-explanatory and everything. So we're going to talk about a review of The Last of Us Part 2. It's an interesting one to review. I'm sure others feel the same, but maybe they don't want to come out and say it. And honestly, that's totally fine if they don't. So let's get off with a few things off the bat. So let's start with environment and graphics. And the environment and graphics for this game is pretty phenomenal, and probably the top 4 games right now on the PS4. The environment is fantastic. You can easily get lost, and I have many of times, on the route of where to go. Nothing is very placeholder. Everything looks like a realistic environment. You can run, hide, jump, and try different routes, and there's definitely a lot of openness to this. Now, with that being said, this is a very linear game, so it's not open world. However, there are portions of the game that feel open world-ish because it's kind of an illusion, because there's certain places you go to in a certain order, and you can actually complete the game in that order, getting those items and getting those things as you kind of go through it and you play the game itself. So the environment and the graphics, top notch. Probably the best that I've ever encountered. Gameplay. The gameplay core loop itself, I actually really like and enjoy, and the reason being is because they took the formula of The Last of Us 1 and tweaked it and made it better. Now, with that being said, I very much enjoyed The Last of Us 1. I very much enjoyed shooting, jumping around, doing the stealth assassinations on those folks, and, you know, fighting the different infected and things of that nature. So if you liked The Last of Us 1, you're really going to enjoy this game, because honestly, the first one, the core loop, was really fun, and this one, it's the same way. It's loot, shoot, jump over obstacles, and kind of repeat. And it definitely doesn't change much other than that. There are a few scripted events that kind of happen, but it's very minimal versus kind of the rest of the game itself. So what I would say is that if you liked The Last of Us 1, you're going to absolutely love this game as far as the gameplay goes. Now, just keep in mind that it's a Naughty Dog game, so it's very much runs the same type of formula as other Naughty Dog games. I will say, based on the comparison of the other games like Uncharted, even the first one, there's a lot less scripted events. It's more focused on the gameplay and the, looting and the shooting and basically, kind of overcoming obstacles and killings of those enemies. This piece is going to be the cutscene graphics. Also very well. Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson did a fantastic job voicing Ellie and also Joel in this particular game. The facial animations, as well as anybody discussing in the game, as well as the cinematic kind of run through, was done very well. That just doesn't get better than that. So I would say on that regard, that also is top notch on it. The inclusion of also the crafting, they've further improved upon. This could kind of, I guess, fall, instead of its own category, I guess it can fall into gameplay. But the crafting itself is really cool. It's kind of the same deal. You're leveling up based on medicine that you pick up throughout the games, like the pills. That gives you additional abilities and such. And then picking up spare parts, screws and metallic objects that provide you towards wrench icons towards your different weapons. You can update them. What was really cool about updating and improving the weapons, though, was that it basically showed kind of the changes that was done to the weapon, what they actually do to add those mods to it to update it. And I thought that part was pretty cool. It even, if you take a look at some of the cinematics, it even kind of records the amount of, ammunition you have to actually show that in the weapon while you're working on it. So a little few points there, which is pretty amazing. All right. Now, all that being said, we're going to get to the final part that I'm sure everybody wants to talk about, and that's the story. So let me put it this way, and let me start by saying this. I've worked in the gaming industry for some games out there, not all of them. Every scenario and situation is going to be very different. Making a game is not easy. It's actually quite difficult. It's kind of project management. It's getting all the projects and all the different departments working together. When I was briefly in, game development, and I still kind of do it as a hobby, it's not easy, because designing it for yourself, you kind of have to take yourself out of the equation and determine what is the best way for designing for the audience and the crowd that you're doing from. Now, that's just one person. You start introducing multiple people, multiple designers, multiple story writers, or anything like that, it gets a little messy, especially with all the different opinions, different cooks in the kitchen wanting to make changes. Now, that being said, it's not impossible. You can definitely have different ways of testing your audience. You can definitely have a lot of play tests, and over time, you can determine whether or not people are actually going to enjoy a game or not and release it in a good state. It's been done before. It's been done many of times. So with all this being said, though, we could do a whole video on the industry as a whole for gaming. It's not great. I was in QA. I started there before I went into designing and actually, project management into things of that nature. And like I've said in the past, I have a lot of friends that work in the industry. They know that it's not perfect, and it's definitely something that needs to be fixed. Crunch is a constant conversation and will continue to evolve in as a conversation that needs to be made, because a lot of crunch happens. A lot of companies believe that you're changing the world, and because of the fact you're working on something that's mostly in entertainment, that crunch is necessary and you just accept it, and that is not correct by any stretch of the means, in my opinion. It's way wrong. I'm very anti-crunch when it comes to these things. You always move the date, or you always change the scope. That's how it works. And I will say, as an industry as a whole, it does need a change. But that's a story for another video. All right. With that being said, I do not at all, and there's a lot of folks in the industry that I am friends with, that I work with, that know that leaks are not tolerated and are definitely not something you want to do. No matter how shitty of a company can be, leaking a video game is a terrible idea, especially plot points and story. And here's why. It's not the fact that you're trying to give the big, F you to the game company that you're going towards. It's a terrible way of thinking about it. But ultimately, which it could be satisfying in that sense if you want to do that. But the problem is when you leak something like that, and there are those that are working in that industry, enjoy what they do, enjoy being in the company that they're with, even though you may have had a falling out, it causes a big disruption and ripple effect on the purchasing of games. And when it gets released, you're deterring a lot of people away. And you have to keep in mind that when you do something like that, all that hard work, all the years of work that all these departments and people are putting together is going to shit. It's gone. Mainly because of the fact that you wanted to leak something. So I don't encourage, and I don't even want to hear that leaking is the greatest thing ever and that person should get a medal. No, they shouldn't. In fact, it's terrible that they did that, because you're basically spitting on those that have put all their hard work and time into making something great for the masses in the gaming industry, which is kind of why I kind of left to some degree, because this leaking it is not going to help. It's going to cause disruption in sales. But the biggest thing, and we will never know, even this goes for The Last of Us Part 2, when you leak story elements like this, then it prompts folks to action. And when they do that, they make changes, very sudden and quick changes. So maybe the story that may have been leaked might have been true or might not have been. but ultimately could have changed the ultimate resolve of what happened when this was released. So, leaking is not a good thing. No one should ever leak this information, and it's terrible whoever did, because you're literally throwing the work away from tons of people that put a lot of their heart and soul in this game and to make it great. Okay, now that I got that out of the way. Story. So, here's the thing. The story, I'm not going to be one to say that I am the best when it comes to story. I haven't written a book. I don't write books. I don't write movies. So my opinion is going to be very subjective when it comes to this. The story that was done to this game and the momentum and things that it was doing was critically acclaimed and changing. I understand that completely. The content itself, the story itself was done, and it was done fairly well, but it definitely was weak in many regards. The one thing is the sequencing. I've read some interviews with Neil Druckmann, and I've read some other things of folks from Naughty Dog talking about the sequencing of this. So this was probably the hardest thing they need to figure out, and I don't think they spent enough time figuring it out, because the sequencing for this game is not right. I'm not going to say details, because honestly that's going to spoil it more. I'm not going to spoil the story for folks watching this, but I will tell you this. The sequencing of the first half and the second half of the game, I think the story itself would have came off a little bit more motivating if they changed it. Because here's the thing. When you go through one part of the story and then you go through the second part and literally you're starting over with new weapons, maybe a new cast and new folks for a multitude of reasons. It's very dismotivating when you're told the final act or told what happened to a lot of these characters before you get to that point. It ruins the motivation for the game, and this was the problem with it. The first half of the game, I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved this game as content-wise of the first half. The problem was when the second half started, and again, I can't say specifics or won't say specifics, is that it takes a turn where there's just things kind of restarted and started over when you already know the fate of this cast, this crew, these folks coming along, and already seeing the ending of what's going to happen, and it's very demotivating to the players, including myself. I like to call it the Negan effect. If you've watched The Walking Dead, and you've seen how the evolution of the group and the folks that started in the series, when Negan comes along and makes changes to the entire foundation and characters that you knew and belovedly enjoyed and loved and learning about, it makes the motivation of it difficult in a game. For a series, you have plenty of episodes and plenty of time to kind of build up that trust and that motivation of what these folks are doing. In here, you didn't have that. And that's the problem, is it was just one of those where the Negan effect happened, and then boom, you're just in there, and guess what? You're stuck doing it. Now, this may be what they intended. They maybe wanted you to feel very uncomfortable while playing this or demotivating, but I can tell you one thing. I was a big advocate, huge advocate for this game, cinematic-wise, but as soon as that started happening, you start losing a lot of motivation to, why do I need to continue this when I already know kind of the final act and how it's going to end out? Because it's not super like well known, but you kind of get a good idea of everything before it should have. So I would say, in order to improve on this, the sequencing on stories, like the different parts of the story, should have changed drastically, because it just feels like it was rushed. It feels like the first half was severely thought out, very much thought out. And then what they did was they made some changes, made some switches, and then they were just kind of hopeful. I don't know if that is truly the case, but it just feels that way. Not to mention what kind of compounds against it is there's definitely some plot holes. There's definitely some, areas of the plot that you kind of run into. And it just kind of makes it feel like it doesn't entirely make good sense in the sequence that it does. So that's what I can say about the story here on this. It's just, there's a lot of demotivating things that just make it so you don't have the motivation to go towards the end. And that was the problem with it. If you are invested in characters, and let's say something makes it so you can't play them anymore, or they're in a situation where you're playing another person to try to show a different story arc, it's very demotivating to know in that second story arc, the ending kind of already, that, just isn't, it's not fun to know that. Ellie and Joel's adventure in the first game was an incredible journey because Joel, everybody knew, was a mysterious type of man that no one really knew everything about, what he was or what he is and what he did. And then as you learn through it, through conversation between Ellie, who doesn't want to be with him as you're transporting her across, you start to build that rapport, and you take an entire game to get to learn these individuals, and you're so invested towards the end. The problem is with the change that they put in halfway through this game, you don't have that time. It's just, here it is in front of your face, get used to it or don't. And I could tell you that there's probably a good portion of folks on Metacritic that are probably putting some user scores that don't like it is because of that reason. Now, with that being said, though, should you play this game? Should you get it? Well, here's my take and verdict on it. If you enjoyed Last of Us 1, if you enjoyed that one, and you played it all the way to the end because of the characters in it, and you liked the gameplay, you enjoyed the adventure, and you love that core loop of looting, shooting, crafting, and continuing to go forward in it, you're absolutely going to enjoy this game. This was the thing that kept me in all the way through, was being able to actually play that core loop, because it's addicting. It is. It's very fun. The interesting thing that I know a lot of folks also didn't mention about the gameplay was that when you're in the middle between infected and the humans, which they had maybe one or two battle occasions where you can do that in the first game, this happens a lot more often. And it's really great when you can do an alien isolation type thing of throwing a bottle or a Molotov somewhere. They start causing a lot of noise, the humans do, and then the infected go and attack them, and then they just kind of attack each other. Beautiful. I love it. That's the thing that makes me happy about Alien Isolation, and specifically about this one. So if you like the gameplay loop in the first one and you enjoyed it as much as you did, which it's a prerequisite, really, if you're going to play the sequel of The Last of Us, you're going to probably need to like the first one. And if you liked the first one, there's plenty of things here for you to enjoy in this one. If you didn't care much for the first one, but you want to see the ending and want to see the story to the end of this one, I'm just going to tell you there's plenty of sources to figure out that information. If you want to go on that gameplay cinematic adventure for what this is, then I'm just going to tell you you're not going to be happy the whole time, and you may struggle to get through parts of the game. When the story is kind of feels like part of it was really rushed, and it definitely didn't, maybe some of it didn't exactly feel fulfilling, then it's going to be difficult for anybody to stand by this particular game. And unfortunately, this kind of falls in that. I'm glad I bought this game. I'm glad I paid $60 because, to be honest, I wanted to know the ending and also everything as far as the cinematic adventure of Last of Us and where it kind of ended up being. Also because of the fact I enjoyed that gameplay. Was I happy with the way how the story ended up and the content of it? Probably not. There's probably some changes I would have made. I think mostly the sequencing, probably if they changed that up more appropriately. And I mean, if you really want to know, I could probably put out a video later on discussing that and a more deeper analysis. But the sequencing is just very off and it doesn't feel right in a lot of ways. And I bet there are a lot of folks that feel that way. So if you're that individual that likes that, great. If you're just getting into The Last of Us and for some reason you decide you want to start on this one, don't bother. Play the first one. See if you like it first. If you like the first one at all, then you really need to kind of look into yourself to see, can I continue playing more of this? Because a lot of the stress, a lot of the gameplay, loop that you're used to in the first one is in this, and it doesn't change much. You're just going to have to get used to it if you're going to enjoy it. Just also know that your answer to your question of what type of story ends up in the rest of them is going to get answered, but I'm going to tell you that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. It's not the easiest. So anyway, so if you like The First of Us, you enjoy the gameplay, you enjoy it very much on the first one, you're going to love this game. If you didn't like it and you just kind of went through it hoping the story was great, do not buy this game. Because that's more of what it is. There's nothing super innovative, and that's the thing, is like, this is a Naughty Dog game. If you like Naughty Dog's way of storytelling and things of that nature, you're probably still going to enjoy this to some degree. Just the story content doesn't feel like, to me, it didn't feel like it was much of a payoff. So if you're really dependent on the story, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be an easy journey to you. And I would almost say just kind of wait till it's on discount to get it.
Hey all, future me. I just wanted to check in and basically add in a few more comments as I was editing this video itself. But basically there's like 3 things I wanted to highlight, and one is, one is going to be 2 things, which is about the bugs that I ran into in The Last of Us 2. I don't understand it. I just wanted to make a note why the ladder system is so difficult to implement, because that was the one thing I had the biggest problem with. I probably died from ladders more than anything else because of the fact that for some reason sometimes the character just like Ellie and any of them, doesn't grab onto the ladders right, and you just fall off and die. It happened so many times with me. I don't understand why. And then the second thing is enemy pop-in was also pretty constant in this game. It wasn't enough that it angered me completely, but it definitely popped up enough that it just was kind of a bug that kept popping up, which was like you just go through an area and then all of a sudden there's just a ton of enemies around you for no reason. And it's not cinematic by any means. There's no reason for it. It just happened that way. And then last but not least, this is just a note to developers. If you're going to put dogs in the game, dogs should not be killed, honestly. Innocent pups that you play and throw things, to play with on, like, they shouldn't be able to die, because it just turned me off on the game. It probably hurt me more than anything else in this game, is that the fact that your dogs were chasing you, innocent, nice creatures, and you had to kill them. Anyway, things to note.
But if you like the first one and love that world, you're gonna love this one as far as the gameplay goes. Anyway, that's all I have to say on this. Throw me comments down below on how you feel about this thing, because it's a conversation that's going to continue going forward. It's going to continue to be discussed, and it's not going to go away for a while. So feel free to include it in there, and I'd love to talk about it with you. If you didn't enjoy the content or my position on this video, that's fine. You don't have to throw a like, or whatever. You could probably aren't even this far if that's the case. Just hit me a like if you like the production value of what I did on this, in this video, and I'll continue to improve things, as well as any subscription as well if you want to see more. If you love it, go and also hit a like and subscribe, and that way it helps me to continue to throw more of these together. So anyway, I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.